Hey everybody, it's Christina Holloway here, and today we're going to talk about what it means to have a leadership failure. And the way I'm going to discuss a really great framework on how to deal with a failure when you're a leader is to talk about the show Ted Lasso. So I'm really excited to do this video. I actually did quite a bit of research on it. We are going to talk about the television show and a specific dialogue in a specific episode. So if you have not seen Ted Lasso and you're very excited to see it, which you should be, wait to watch my video until after you've watched the show. We really are just going to dig into some of the character development, the way the situations played out, and how it showed us signs that there were problems and where Ted could have paid more attention and avoided what happens at the end of season 2, potentially. Okay, I'm very excited about this, so let's get started. We're going to look at the 2 areas where he's actually showing up as a leader, Ted Lasso, and where he's finding success and where he stumbled. In the space where he stumbled is where we can find a framework on how to avoid that type of situation, especially if you're navigating something similar, and I'll explain. So he has 2 roles as a leader. In one way, he needs to build a high-performance team, and he's very good at it. We can see from the beginning of the show that he has a way of assessing who's on his team, picking out who has big egos and the big stars, and then helping them re-understand what it means to be a team player, especially on his team. And we see this evolution over the course of season 1 and season 2. The other half, which is equally important, is that he needs to build a team of coaches who are going to accentuate or complement his leadership style. We see that with Coach Beard. We see that very early. It's one of the very first scenes is how much Ted trusts Coach Beard. And at the same time, Coach Beard has a very almost instinctive understanding of what Ted needs and how to fill in his gaps. Together, they make a cohesive whole. You can see this specifically when Ted doesn't really know or understand the game of soccer, but Coach Beard has taken the time to do the research and understands what the rules are and is able to give him that information when he needs it. Now, here's where he runs into trouble. He empowers Coach Beard. He has a great relationship with him. And he makes a small assumption that it's okay for him to treat others that way as well. And when he gives empowerment to other people, we see in the show how different people see empowerment in different ways. For Coach Beard, he's the yin to Ted's yang. They make a whole. But Nathan comes along, who has always been ignored. And he has a very strong perspective of how the team is supposed to operate because he's been there for so long and he's been watching and observing. And once Ted picks up on his level of knowledge, he empowers Nathan. The problem is he doesn't know Nathan very well. So to give Nathan the level of empowerment that he gives Coach Beard becomes overwhelming for Nathan. And at the end of season 2, the very last episode, and almost I think the very last scene, we see that Nathan is having a hard time accepting and understanding what it means to be given trust and empowerment for his thoughts and ideas and allowed to share them and then see them in reality, see them play out, and then what it feels like to be celebrated for his successes. All of that is unfamiliar to Nathan. Now, when we're looking at a business environment, because leadership is very, very strong parallel to sports, the analogies are really appropriate. It's very easy to talk in a sports analogy to get the point across when you're talking about business. So if I'm to take a step back for a minute and talk about how Ted needed to build a high-performance team, that was his sports team, the players on his team. But we can look back at any company that's going through a really huge project or maybe something that needs to be delivered for a client, and you need to build a team for implementation or a team that's going to work on the material to do delivery. and we're talking about a services-based business right now, I'm just going to use that as an analogy, then you need to build your team. You need to understand who the egos are. You need to understand who has seniority. You need to give them different roles. Who's the captain? Everybody gets an assignment, and they're all given different responsibilities, and they're all recognized for their different areas of expertise, and they're put in positions where we can maximize their strengths and talent. Now, the other half is to build a management team that's going to get the most out of that implementation team. So if you're in charge, a VP, an executive director, or even a senior manager in charge of a smaller group, you absolutely want a leadership team that can go in and deal with the details while you're still working on the strategic picture and then a lot of the problem solving. So this is where we are. Now with Ted, he had a little bit of a blind spot when it came to trusting people on his leadership team. So he didn't really understand where Nathan was coming from when he said this to him. This is the dialogue they had. I don't think that I can get the clips, so I'm just going to read this to you so you understand a little bit of Nathan's grievances when it comes to how Ted was leading him throughout those last 2 seasons. Okay, so Ted says, "You're mad as hell. I mean, I just want to know why. What have I got to learn here?" And Nathan says, "Well, you want to know what you did?" And Ted says, "Yes, please." So Nathan tells him, "Okay, I'll tell you what you did. You made me feel like I was the most important person in the whole world. And then you abandoned me, like a switch on a light, just like that. And I worked my ass off trying to get your attention back, to prove myself to you, to make you like me again. But the more I did, the less you cared. And it's like I was invisible. You haven't even got a photo I gave you for Christmas up in your office. It's just a picture of dumb Americans. Everybody loves you. The great Ted Lasso. Well, I think you're a joke. Without me, we wouldn't have won a single match. And they would have shipped your ass back to Kansas where you belong. You sure as hell don't belong here. And well, I do. I belong here. This didn't just fall into my lap. I earned this." And then Ted goes on to try to repair this. "I know you did, Nate. And if I didn't tell you how important you were to me enough, I'm sorry about that." So when I was watching the show, this particular interaction really struck me in terms of what it means to show up as a leader and what it means to understand the dynamics of the people who are working for you. There's ways to repair the situation regardless of what your position is. Now we can see here, Ted makes an effort to apologize at the end, but it's far too little too late. And at the very end, the very last scene that we see in the show, there's a critical development that clearly shows how bad it can get when somebody feels like they're ignored or unappreciated. And here's the reality. Ted gave him so much empowerment. Where most people ignore him because he was the equipment manager, Ted asked him what he thought. Ted gave him a platform and a voice. Ted let him stand in the front and do press conferences. There were plenty of opportunities where he was illustrating how much he appreciated him, but that's not what Nathan needed, and that's not how Nathan read what it meant to be appreciated. So let's talk about where Ted missed some cues and why it was important for him to understand how he developed his leadership team. So let's talk about this framework. Okay, so step 1, check in with your team. This is about checking in with his leadership team, which means talking to Coach Beard, understanding who he's bringing aboard as his coaches, asking, what do you think about this person? Because it wasn't just Nathan that he brought. He also ended up getting Roy Kent, who also was very knowledgeable about the sport and absolutely knew his role. He had a very clear understanding of why he was on a coaching staff and what role he was fulfilling and what level of expertise he had to share, which is that he used to play on the team, he knew the players, and he knew the weaknesses of the opponents. And so his ability to coach in this space allowed him to bring a level of expertise that Ted needed and was aware of. So there was clarity here. Asking Nathan, who was an equipment manager, to come aboard and be a coach or an assistant coach was a little bit too far outside the normal progression of someone's career. And it caused Nathan's insecurities to flare up. So take the temperature of your team. There's a moment where when you build your team, they can sit down and start talking about what are objectives, what are the rules, what are we trying to do? And then everyone has a clear understanding of what their role is, what the expectations are for them and what area of expertise we're relying on in order to achieve our ultimate goal, which in this case is to win games. Number 2, check the culture. Ted spent a lot of time paying attention to his team because he gets paid to inspire a sports team to win. He doesn't get paid to babysit his coaches. And so he spends less time paying attention to how the culture could be developing, even though he showed up with a very strong personality and set the tone for the kind of culture it really was. So when you have people from a different background who are coming along and coming aboard your group, you absolutely want to start first by establishing what the culture is going to look like. And in this case, he could have actually just said out loud, we treat everyone with respect, all the way down to the equipment manager. Because, hey, guess what, Nathan? We've treated you with the same level of respect, and we would expect nothing less from you. Number 3, schedule one-on-one meetings. Now, he did spend time one-on-one with each of his coaches, but for very different reasons. And for Nathan, I believe this was about him buying him a suit and spending time with him and acting like a father figure. And granted, Ted could not possibly have understood how much Nathan needed a father figure. But to sit down and talk to him one-on-one about what his expectations were for filling a new role, where his level of expertise was, asking him what it meant to be appreciated on the team and if he was feeling appreciated, would have helped earlier to kind of figure out where Nathan was feeling resentful. Number 4, give them permission to give feedback early and often. Would Nathan have had a huge blowout at the end of season 2 and the very last episode? Well, the writers probably would have allowed that to happen anyway because it's a big cliffhanger. But anyway, if he had given him permission to give feedback earlier on and he had taken it seriously, Nathan might have felt a level of trust where he could share that information and he could share feedback and he could share his feelings. They did have I forgot what the little group was of these men together, like a little club where they would sit down and talk about personal things. But even there, Nathan didn't feel comfortable. He shared every once in a while, but Nathan was never the person who came with information. He was usually the one who was helping solve problems. If you happen to observe during group meetings or even your small group meetings that there's 1 or 2 people who are not sharing and you're getting a sense that there's a lack of trust, you could be looking at somebody who's withholding and potentially somebody who hasn't yet established trust. They're really not sure where you're coming from. And so here in this space, you're giving them permission to give feedback, which means they should be allowed to tell you how they feel. That could have happened much sooner. Nathan could have felt freedom to talk to Ted earlier. And his feedback was, you never had time for me. You paid attention to me in the beginning, but then once I started doing what you wanted, you left me alone. And I still needed you. This could have been feedback that he received sooner on. And it can be anything. Sending an email to check in on you, sending a text, just giving him a call, or telling him, come into my office. I want to get a read for how you're feeling and what the status is, what you're doing. And last, number 5, understand the strategic direction and understand the role of your management team. Now, in Ted Lasso, they all want to win. They need to repair the damage done by being downgraded, and they need to get back up into the league, and then they need to start winning games and winning a championship. So everyone knows exactly what their job is and what they're supposed to be doing. Inside the leadership team, this management team, there were problems. And you see this near the end when Nathan decides to do the opposite. He gives them advice that he thinks isn't going to work, and it did work. They celebrated him at the end, and instead of feeling validated, he feels resentful. Nothing he does is going to get Ted's attention, which is what he wants. He doesn't want to be celebrated by everybody. He wants to be celebrated by Ted. So when you have a leadership team and there is somebody who seems to have an idea of the direction for the project, but it isn't in alignment with the strategic direction, it's a huge red flag to come back and ask, what's motivating you here? Now, all of us get motivated for different reasons. There's competitive people, there's people who are just philanthropic, and then there's people who want power. And they'll tell you power and recognition are important. You get feedback from different people with different motivations for why they're on the team. And it's very important to understand where they're coming from, but it's also important to understand why they showed up to do the job you gave them. Okay, so that's it for this video. So I hope you liked this video. I hope you got something out of it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.